The first shot was a whisper, a hot little bee that zipped past her ear and kissed the air where her head had just been. She didn't have time to think about it. The second shot was a scream. It hit the rock beside her face, and the world exploded in a spray of red dust and sharp stone that stung her blood-caked cheek. Naomi Callahan didn't look back. Looking back was how you died out here. Her lungs were on fire. Every muscle in her legs screamed for mercy. But the desert didn't know the meaning of the word. The leather satchel slung over her shoulder banged against her ribs with a dull, heavy rhythm, a second, desperate heartbeat. It was soaked through, sticky with her own sweat and her own blood. Behind her, the wind howled across the high mesa, and carried on that wind was a sound she'd been hearing for 2 days straight. The sound of hooves. And they were getting closer. She stumbled, her boot catching on a gnarled root, and she went down hard. The bag nearly flew from her grasp. Her knees hit the unforgiving ground, and her mouth filled with the taste of iron and grit. For a single, terrifying moment, she thought about just staying there, letting the dust take her, letting them finally catch up and finish the job. But then, through the shimmering heat, she saw it. A cabin. Low and squat, built from the same red earth it stood on, as if it had grown there. A windmill turned slow and tired behind it. A horse corral, empty but standing. And from the stone chimney, a thin, controlled line of smoke rose into the endless sky. Someone was home. That single thought was enough. Naomi staggered back to her feet, her legs shaking uncontrollably. The pain in her side, where a bullet had grazed her 2 miles back, flared into a hot, blinding agony. Her shirt, once white, was now a stiff, dark map of her suffering. She reached the edge of the small yard just as the cabin door creaked open. A man stepped onto the porch. He was tall, with a rifle held easy in one hand, his eyes squinted against the wind. An old hat was pulled low over a face that looked like it had been carved from oak and left in the sun for 100 years. He didn't look surprised to see death riding up his lane. He just looked at her. Naomi froze, her chest heaving, her hand clamped around the satchel strap. This bag held the last remnants of her soul, and she'd die before she let it go. "I don't know you," she rasped, her voice a dry crackle. "And I don't know where the hell I am." The man's voice cut through the wind, sharp and clean. "Get inside, girl, or die under this sky." There was something in his tone that made her move. It wasn't kindness. It was survival. She half fell, half climbed the porch steps. The man, Silas Vaughn, stepped aside just enough to let her pass. As the door closed behind her, the rising wind carried the sound of the riders, closer now. Far too close. The inside of the cabin was simple, one room. A stove, a rough table, a cot in the corner. It was a place stripped down to the bare essentials of living. Naomi let the satchel drop to the floor like it was burning her skin, and she collapsed against the wall, cradling her wounded shoulder. Silas slid a heavy bolt across the door and moved to the window, peering through a crack in the shutter. "Who's chasing you?" he asked, his voice low. Naomi looked up. Her face was a pale mask under the dirt, her eyes a startling green. Her lips parted, but the words were stuck in her throat. "They killed my father," she finally choked out. "They killed everyone in Broken Mesa." Silas's brow furrowed. He turned to face her. "Broken Mesa is 2 days south of here." Naomi nodded slowly. "It was," she whispered. "They burned it at dawn. They set fire to the church while the whole town was inside." He didn't say anything. He just walked to the stove, poured water from a bucket into a tin cup, and handed it to her. It was warm, but it tasted like life. She drank it down without stopping. "What's in the bag?" he asked. She hesitated. Her fingers hovered over the worn leather as if it might bite her. "Proof," she said. "Letters, contracts, orders signed by men who never wanted their names seen in the light of day." His jaw worked. You rode through 2 days of hell for a bag of paper. I rode for what they did to my town, she shot back, a spark of fire in her eyes. I rode because I was the only one left who could. The wind rattled the shutters. The sun finally gave up, and the long shadows in the room merged into one. Silas checked his rifle. Loaded, clean, maybe 30 rounds. You got a name? He asked. Naomi Callahan. He nodded once. Silas Vaughn. A beat of silence. I didn't come here to die, Naomi said. Silas looked out the window again into the growing dark. Sometimes, he said, that's not up to us. The sound of hooves returned just after nightfall. Silas blew out the lamp and motioned her away from the window. 6 riders, he muttered. Maybe 7, all armed. They're not here for a friendly chat. Naomi's hand found the satchel again. Her voice was flat, empty. They work for the railroad, Dusk Pacific. You won't find them on any official payroll, but they get paid well. They make problems disappear. Silas went still. That name was not new to him. They wanted to lay track through Broken Mesa, she continued, her voice a near whisper. The town council voted no, so they sent men to erase the vote. And the voters. The last bit of light died on the horizon. Naomi closed her eyes. I don't know if you believe in justice, Mr. Vaughn, she said, but I'm carrying what's left of it. Silas didn't answer. He just watched the horizon. And then the first torch appeared in the distance, a single malevolent star in the blackness. The satchel sat on the table between them like a time bomb. For a long time, Silas Vaughn just stared at it. The oil lamp cast flickering shadows on the walls, making the small cabin feel like a cage. Outside, the wind whispered threats. Inside, Naomi finally untied the leather flap. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from a rage that had been burning inside her for 2 days. She pulled out a stack of documents and spread them on the rough-hewn wood. And Silas saw why they wanted her dead. Stamped letters, ledgers filled with neat, tidy columns, and contracts all bearing the golden crest of the Dusk Pacific Railroad. And next to that crest was another seal, a red wax stamp that made Silas's blood run cold, the seal of Governor Leland Crane. He leaned closer, his eyes scanning the elegant script. Land acquisition orders for entire counties. Eviction notices that had never been signed by a judge. Memos authorizing strategic elimination of local resistance. And at the bottom of the pile, a ledger. A simple accounting book that tracked payments to freelance enforcers. Blood money. Each entry had a name next to it. One name, Clayton Dusk, appeared again and again. Underneath his name were others. Some had little stars next to them. One entry was circled in red ink. Broken Mesa cleared. All objectives met. No remaining opposition. They made it look like it never even existed, Naomi said, her voice hollow. But I lived there. I bled there. And I carry what they couldn't burn. Silas finally looked up from the papers. The governor, he said, his voice a low growl. He signed their death warrants with a gold pen. It wasn't a question. He had seen this kind of corruption before, but never laid out so bare, so shamelessly. Naomi's skin looked gray in the lamplight. My father was on the town council. When they refused the rail line, Dusk's men showed up the next week. They said they were there to offer protection. It was the last time we ever saw the marshal. Her gaze drifted to the flickering flame of the lamp. Then the preacher went missing. Then 3 children died of a fever the doctor couldn't explain. They came at dawn. They laughed while they dragged us from our homes. They shot the ones who tried to run. Her voice cracked just once. They herded the rest of us into the church and set it on fire. She took a shaky breath. I was in the hills, gathering roots for my father's cough. When I saw the smoke, I thought they were burning trash. I never imagined they were burning people. Silas pushed back from the table. He paced the small cabin, a caged lion. Outside, the wind rattled a loose board. These men, they kill entire towns and leave no one to tell the tale. How did you get these papers? Naomi pointed to the satchel. After the fire, I ran. Made it to the old freight station. It was abandoned. I found a locked trunk in the foreman's office. These were inside. I think they were meant to be burned, but someone had second thoughts. Someone with a conscience, Silas murmured. She nodded. Or someone who got scared halfway through. He stopped pacing and stared at her, really stared at her for the first time. What's your plan? I ride to Denver, she said, her voice firm again. There's a journalist, Thomas Mackenzie. He's been digging into the railroad's land deals. He's the only one left who might not be on their payroll. Silas let out a slow breath. That's 8 days of hard riding, through outlaw country, with those men outside knowing every rock and every trail. I know, she said, her voice turning to ice. Then I die trying. He turned away, looking at his own reflection in the dark glass of the window. He looked old. He looked tired. He handed her another cup of water. How did they find you? He asked. I sent a letter. He turned back, his expression a mix of disbelief and something that looked a little like admiration. A letter? She pulled a crumpled scrap of paper from her coat. Scrawled across it in angry ink were a few simple words. You want the rest of the truth? Come and find me. Naomi Callahan, Broken Mesa. I sent it to every postmaster on the border, she explained. I figured if Dusk's men read everything, I might as well speak directly to them. Silas shook his head. You're either the bravest soul I've ever met or the biggest fool. Naomi almost smiled. Out here, she said, they're the same thing. Silence settled in the cabin again. Outside, a horse snorted. Silas moved to the window, lifting the curtain just an inch. Torches, holding their position, waiting. They're not going to wait for morning, he muttered. They never do, she replied. He looked at her shoulder. You still bleeding? It's slowed down. Hurts like hell. Whiskey in the cupboard, bandages in the drawer. As she cleaned the wound, wincing as the whiskey stung, Silas stared at the papers again. His eyes landed on the governor's seal. He came through here once, Silas said, his voice distant. Shook my hand. Promised the railroad would bring progress, schools, clinics, life. He looked down at the ledger listing the towns that had been cleared. All it brought was fire. Naomi finished tying the bandage. You believe me now? I believe you, he said. The unspoken question hung in the air between them. What are you going to do about it? Finally, he looked at her. You sleep for 2 hours. Then we talk about getting you to Denver alive. She met his gaze, her own question in her eyes. Why? He glanced at the satchel, at the papers that were the only tombstone for 43 souls. Because, he said, his voice barely a whisper, it's worth more than just staying quiet. Outside in the dark, Clayton Dusk lowered his spyglass. He smiled. Let her rest, he murmured to the man beside him. Let her feel safe. His smile was a cold, cruel thing. We move at first light. The first bullet hit the porch post just as the sun broke the horizon. Splinters of wood exploded into the cabin. Silas Vaughn tackled Naomi, pulling her to the floor as his coffee cup shattered against the stone hearth. A second shot tore through the top of the door. Then, a heavy, waiting silence. They were surrounded. Naomi crawled to the window, her heart pounding against her ribs. Through a crack in the shutters, she saw them. 7 men, rifles aimed at the cabin. And in the center, sitting on his horse as if he were reviewing troops, was the man in the long black coat. He tilted his head back, and his voice carried on the morning air, smooth and confident. You give us the girl in the bag, he called out, and I might let you keep your heart beating. Silas was already at the other window, his rifle cocked. He didn't answer. "That's Clayton Dusk," Naomi whispered, a cold dread washing over her. "He's the one. He's the one who gave the order." She remembered his face, the calm, almost bored expression as he watched her father beg for the lives of the town's children. Just before he pulled the trigger, another shot hit the porch. They weren't just warning shots anymore. They were testing the cabin's defenses. "You've got 1 minute, old man," Dusk shouted. "Send her out and I'll let you die quiet. Keep her and you'll burn like the rest of that trash." Silas glanced at Naomi. Then he reached up to the fireplace mantel. An old Colt .45 hung from 2 rusted nails. He pulled it down, checked the cylinder. Fully loaded. He held it out to her. "You ever shot one of these?" Naomi took the pistol. Her hand was steady. She thumbed back the hammer. "My father taught me," she said, her voice quiet. "He said if I was going to live out here, I'd better learn how to take something's life before it takes mine." She saw the question in his eyes. "He taught me to shoot," she clarified. "He never taught me to kill." "That part comes fast," Silas said. The front window exploded, glass showering the room. Naomi rolled away, ducking behind the overturned table. Silas fired once, a clean shot that kicked up dirt by the feet of one of Dusk's men. It bought them a few seconds. "They're at the back, too," Naomi said, peering through the rear shutters. "Figured," Silas grunted. She looked back at Dusk. The morning sun glinted off something on his coat. Silver conchos lining the collar and chest. One of them was dented, and it had a small, familiar mark. Her breath caught in her throat. "Wait," she said. Silas paused, halfway through reloading his rifle. "Those conchos," she whispered, pointing. "The one with the cross, the tiny one, etched in the center." He squinted, then nodded. "My father made that," she said, her voice cracking. "He was a silversmith. Dusk came into his shop a few months ago. Said he wanted them repaired. My father marked every piece he ever worked on with a small cross. He said every man deserved a blessing, even if they didn't know how to ask for one." The brutal, sickening realization hit Silas like a physical blow. "Your father." Naomi's face was a mask of grief and fury. "We trusted him. He smiled at us. He talked about protecting the territory." Her fingers tightened around the revolver. "He didn't just kill us. He made us help him do it." Another crash, this time from a side window. Silas fired, and a man outside screamed. "The barn!" Naomi yelled. Through the broken window, she could see thick black smoke pouring from the roof. They'd set it on fire. Silas's horse was trapped inside. "No place left to run!" Dusk's voice boomed. "We'll burn you out, just like we did in Broken Mesa." The pain in Naomi's shoulder was a hot, sharp anchor, reminding her she was still alive, reminding her she had to fight. Silas moved to the kitchen, kicked aside a rug, and revealed a trap door. "There's a tunnel," he said, his voice urgent. "Goes down to an old mining shaft. Comes out by the creek." Naomi stared at him. "You could escape." "No," he said, his eyes hard. "You can." They looked at each other. They both knew what he was saying. Someone had to stay behind. Someone had to buy the time. Before she could argue, another sound cut through the air. Hoofbeats, fast, from the east. 3 riders crested the ridge. Sunlight flashed on their badges. "Territorial marshals," Silas breathed. For a single, wild second, hope surged through Naomi. But Clayton Dusk saw them too. His face went rigid. He raised his hand and barked an order. "Kill them all! Make it look like a range war!" His men turned as one, their rifles erupting in a volley of fire. The first marshal went down. The second almost made it to cover before a bullet threw him from his horse. The third was dead before he hit the ground. 3 federal badges lay glinting in the dirt. Naomi watched in horror. They had killed them without a second's hesitation. Silas grabbed her arm, his grip like iron. The game just changed, he said. He shoved the satchel into her arms. The tunnel, now! When I start shooting, you run, and you don't look back. He didn't give her a chance to argue. Don't let them die for nothing, he growled. Not your father, not your town, not those marshals. Outside, guns were being reloaded. The silence stretched. Naomi's hand tightened around the satchel. She looked at Silas, at the fire burning in his eyes. And she knew what she had to do. The first thing she felt was the heat. It rose through the floorboards as she dropped into the darkness of the tunnel. Above her, the cabin was already starting to burn. She heard Silas's Winchester bark once, twice, and then a final, deafening silence. She didn't let herself think about what it meant. She clutched the satchel and ran. The tunnel was old and narrow, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and smoke. A single lantern left by Silas cast long, dancing shadows. The smoke was getting thicker, chasing her. She ran harder, her lungs screaming. The tunnel forked. She took the left path, just as Silas had told her, and then a figure appeared in the lantern light ahead. Naomi skidded to a stop, raising the Colt. "We are not just fighting to live," a low, steady voice said. "We are fighting for what they tried to erase." A woman stepped into the light. Her hair was braided, her clothes covered in red dust. A small pouch made of deerskin hung around her neck. "Tula Greyfeather," Naomi breathed, nearly collapsing with relief. Tula raised an eyebrow. "You thought I was dead?" she asked. "Not yet." She pointed down a side passage. "They're watching the creek bed. We have to go another way." They moved quickly into a smaller tunnel that smelled of mildew and old roots. "I saw the smoke from my ridge," Tula explained. "I recognized the fire, the same bastard flame they used at Broken Mesa." They emerged into the ruins of an old, collapsed trading post. From there, they could see Dusk's men hunting for them. "They've already killed 3 marshals," Naomi said, her voice shaking. "They don't care who sees them now." Tula knelt beside her. "So what's in that bag that's worth all this?" Naomi opened it. Tula sifted through the papers, her face hardening as she read. Her finger stopped on one document. "Site clearance authorization, tribal lands, East Mesa sector." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "My father worked on that survey crew. They said he died of a snake bite, the day after he filed a complaint about them forcing my people off our land." Naomi looked at her. "Then we both have blood in this fight." Tula's face was like stone. "No," she said. "We both have truth in it." A rider passed close to the ruins. They held their breath until he was gone. Tula pointed to the north. "There's one man who might still help. A preacher in the old mission ruins. Reverend Boone. He has a secret. An old army telegraph line. He can get these papers to Denver before they can stop him." "A preacher with a telegraph?" Naomi asked, skeptical. "He used to be a captain," Tula said. "He lost his company because of a federal betrayal. Now he fights his own wars. With words and wires." A shout echoed from the ridge, too close. "We have to go now," Tula said. "What about Silas?" Naomi asked. Tula's eyes were sad. "If he made it out, he'll find us. If not—" She didn't have to finish. They slid down a dry wash, running toward a box canyon where the abandoned mission stood, its bell tower like a broken finger pointing at the sky. Inside the crumbling chapel, they found him. Reverend Eli Boone, tall, lean, with a wild white beard and the eyes of a soldier who had seen too much. He looked up from his desk as they entered. "I've been expecting you," he said. Naomi placed the satchel on the altar. Boone looked at the papers, his jaw tight. "Truth doesn't rot like bodies," he said, his voice a low rumble. "It just waits to be dug up. And what you've brought me, Miss Callahan, smells a lot like a resurrection." He led them down into the catacombs beneath the mission, to a hidden room. In the center stood a rusted military telegraph station. "I kept this line alive after the war," he explained, attaching wires. "It connects directly to the Denver post. One way only. They don't know it exists, but they monitor the frequency for the right code. And you know the code? Naomi asked. Boone grunted. Girl, I was court-martialed for leaking military secrets. I wrote half their damn codes. He began to type. The keys clicked like rattling bones. As he worked, Naomi felt the weight of the last 2 days crash down on her. She dozed off, dreaming of fire. She woke to Boone's hand on her shoulder. I got the first batch through, he said. If anyone's awake in Denver, they have it now. He then pointed to a shelf filled with dusty folders. Every time someone in this territory has been silenced, their story comes here. Ghost Ridge, Red Hollow, Harper's Run. He opened a folder. It was filled with signed affidavits and maps of towns that no longer existed. Broken Mesa wasn't the start, Boone said, his voice grim, and it won't be the end. Not unless we make it the end. Naomi looked at the folders, at the ghosts of 100 other massacres. Send it, she said. Send all of it. That's a death sentence for anyone named in these papers, Boone warned. They're already dead, Naomi replied, her voice cold as ice. Just then, Tula appeared in the doorway. Movement on the ridge, she said. They're here. The first raindrops began to fall as Boone typed faster. I can get the rest out in 20 minutes, he said. Then we hold them off for 20 minutes, Naomi said, checking the rounds in her Colt. Lightning flashed, illuminating 3 of Dusk's scouts on the ridge. Naomi fired. One of them fell. The battle for the truth had begun. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of time. But they had something Dusk and his men would never understand. They had nothing left to lose. The rain turned the canyon into a river of mud. Naomi and Tula rode hard, the sounds of the gunfight at the mission fading behind them. Boone had stayed. He had given them their chance. There's a road north, he'd said, his fingers never stopping their frantic clicking on the telegraph key. A smuggler's canyon? It's the only way. Now they were on it. The trail was a narrow cut between slick rock walls. Tula led the way, her eyes scanning the cliffs above. They were being hunted, and they both knew it. They found shelter in an old, abandoned ranger station. As Tula started a small, smokeless fire, Naomi felt the despair creeping back in. What if the line didn't get through? She asked, her voice hoarse. Tula looked up from the fire, her eyes glowing in the dim light. Then we still ride, she said. Why? Naomi whispered. Tula's voice was sharp. Because justice is blind, child. That's why it needs someone to lead it by the hand. They didn't rest for long. By dawn, they were riding again. The canyon opened up and they saw them, 6 riders cutting them off, and leading them, on a tall white horse, was Clayton Dusk. We can't outrun them, Naomi said, her hand going to her pistol. No, Tula replied, but we can outthink them. She led them on a series of twisting hidden trails, doubling back, using the land as a weapon. But Dusk's men were relentless, and Naomi was losing blood. They made it to the final rise before the Colorado border. The air was cooler, cleaner. For a moment, it felt like they had made it. Then the shots rang out. Naomi's horse screamed and went down. She was thrown, landing hard on her wounded shoulder. Tula returned fire, but there were too many. The satchel burst open, the precious papers scattering in the mud. As Naomi frantically gathered them, another shot hit Tula. She staggered, dropping to one knee. Go! She yelled, shoving her rifle into Naomi's hands. Go now! I won't leave you! You will! Tula snapped, her voice a fierce growl. Because the truth doesn't ride itself! A voice echoed from the rocks above them. Clayton Dusk. Too close. You ride now, Tula whispered, her eyes burning with a fire that had nothing to do with hatred. Or we both die for nothing. Naomi looked into her friend's eyes, and in them she saw the faces of every soul from Broken Mesa. She saw her father. She saw Silas. She saw Reverend Boone. She grabbed the satchel, scrambled onto Tula's horse, and rode. She didn't look back. She just rode, harder and faster than she had ever ridden in her life, until she crossed the border into Colorado. She reached Denver at midnight, half dead, but alive. She stumbled into the offices of the Denver Post and collapsed into the arms of a stunned journalist named Thomas Mackenzie. When she woke, the documents were spread across a table. "You brought the war to our doorstep," Mackenzie said. "It was already here," she replied. "You just couldn't smell the smoke." "This is enough to destroy the governor, the railroad, everything," he said, his voice filled with awe. But their victory was short-lived. Two of Dusk's men, posing as lawmen, burst in to arrest her. Before they could, another figure appeared in the doorway. It was Silas Vaughn. He was bleeding, battered, but alive. "Your boys forgot their manners," he said, and fired a warning shot. The men fled. "How?" Naomi gasped. "The tunnel had more than one exit," he said with a grim smile. "You held the line." At 4 in the morning, the presses began to roll. The headline would shake the territory to its core. "Massacre at Broken Mesa. Governor and railroad implicated." By sunrise, the city was in an uproar. But in a quiet parlor near the governor's mansion, Clayton Dusk read the paper and smiled. "If we can't silence her with lead," he said to the man beside him, "we'll bury her in court." When Naomi walked into the courthouse the next day, the crowd parted before her. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a reckoning. She stood at the witness table and told them everything. She told them of the fire, the letters, the greed. She told them of Silas, of Tula, of Boone. When they asked her why she didn't just hide, she looked them straight in the eye and said, "Because silence is how they win." The trial lasted 5 days. The verdicts came down like hammer blows. The governor was removed from office. Dusk Pacific's assets were seized. Clayton Dusk was declared a fugitive of the state. 3 months later, Naomi stood over a fresh grave at Silas Vaughn's ranch. He had survived the fire, but not the wounds. She placed a small silver medallion, forged by Tula's people, on the wooden cross. The story of Broken Mesa didn't bring back the dead, but it did something more. It gave a voice to the voiceless. It proved that the truth, no matter how deep you bury it, can still find its way to the light. Naomi Callahan didn't stay in Denver. She rode on, her satchel stitched and repaired, always moving toward the next place where silence had fallen, ready to make it speak. Because some truths don't die. They just wait for someone brave enough to tell them. If you enjoyed this story of justice on the frontier, don't forget to subscribe. We've got another story on your screen right now that you won't want to miss.